With that, let's get started. I'll go ahead and turn the webinar over to longtime AAPS member and board member, Dr. Robert Emmons, who will make a few brief introductory remarks and also introduce our main speaker, Dr. Emmons.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks again to all you participants who are here tonight. It's great to have all of you here. As I said a few moments earlier, I see a lot of familiar names and a lot of unfamiliar names. So welcome to all. Collegiality in American medicine has been in crisis since even before the onset of COVID-19. Constant intrusions by third-party payers and the regulatory state have disrupted the doctor-patient relationship, and those same intrusions have disrupted colleague-to-colleague communication. Those same third parties that are getting involved are hijacking collegial communications to serve their own interests. And now that we're on a medical lockdown and an anxious public is turning more and more to single source information, it's more important than ever that we reestablish our own purely professional networks of communication. We need to be talking to each other and sharing our clinical stories and sharing our interpretations of the scientific literature. To that end, I'm pleased to announce that tonight's webinar is the first in a series sponsored by AAPS. It'll be taking place bi-weekly. We will be in touch with you to let you know about future speakers and future presenters. The information that's presented in this series will be different from the information that you get from other sources, because it won't be filtered through the lens of institutional interests. We aim to present scientific, clinical, professional, and ethical guidance curated by clinicians for clinicians. Now, it's my honor to introduce Andy Schlafly. Andy is my personal friend, and he's a friend to all physicians. He's been the general counsel of AAPS for 25 years. And he's won numerous victories for the physician-patient relationship at both the trial and appellate court level. I'll turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, Bob, and thanks to all of you for being here. We're going to have a very interesting hour discussing this coronavirus crisis and all the laws and executive orders by governors and the president and so on, and the regulatory framework. This is uncharted territory for our country. I've never seen anything like this in my lifetime, and I don't think any of our attendees have either. Stay-at-home orders that affect 90% of Americans now, being told to stay at home. I've been told to stay at home. Most on this call have been told to stay at home. More than half the states have issued these stay-at-home orders statewide. That'll be the first issue we get into. Are those stay-at-home orders legal? What does it affect? And so on. But I just want to say as an introductory matter that because we're in new terrain here, it's not just a medical crisis, it's a political crisis too, and a legal crisis. And various actors are doing things that they never thought they could do before. Governors telling physicians that they cannot prescribe certain life-saving medication. That's never been done before. Governors ordering churches to close. That's never been done before. We're seeing all this happen because there are strong political undercurrents to this crisis. We're in a presidential election year. We're merely months before early voting starts for this presidential election that a lot of people feel very strongly about. And there are what we call trolls on the internet that are out there attacking anyone who endorses, say, the same medication that President Trump praised. If President Trump praised it, then it becomes political. And then if a physician then praises it on the internet, then he gets trolls attacking him. He gets people reporting him to the state medical board. And so you have this whole political overlay, which is essential to understanding what we can do and what we can't do. So I'm not going to get into the medicine of coronavirus or the suitability of certain medications. I'm going to stick with what's legal and the autonomy of physicians and the rights of patients and the public during this big sea change in the assertion of political power by various groups. So with that introduction, I'd like to go to our first agenda item. I'm going to move pretty quickly, take about 40 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for a lot of Q&A. I know we have some very bright attendees here in the audience. As I mentioned, someone who's a state legislator out in the state of Idaho, and we have others whom I recognize. So we're going to leave plenty of time here at the end of my presentation for discussion. But let's start with the stay-at-home orders that are in place now in a number of states: New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, Texas, and so on. And these governors have simply issued as executive orders commands that people don't work, that physicians do not do elective procedures. Physicians are supposed to close down their offices in some states according to these executive orders. And I've been taking phone calls asking me, are these orders lawful? And the answer is not really. No, these executive orders by governors to shut down their state are by and large not lawful. There have been some counties that have done it too. Hillsborough County in Florida, which is where Tampa is, there was a county-wide executive order. Harris County in Texas, which is the biggest county in Texas, it includes Houston, there was a county judge who's not even an attorney, not even a judge, that's just a position she holds. A young woman who just shut down the entire county. Everything. Church services, medical offices, everything, shut everything down. And those things are overreaching, and there's a legal challenge to that particular order that was filed. And then the Governor Abbott of Texas then issued a clarification where he said, no, you're not really allowed to, we're not going to really shut down churches. This talk is mainly going to focus on physicians though. And do physicians have to close their offices because there's a shutdown order in their state? And the short answer to that is probably not. Physicians can probably keep their offices open, as many physicians are doing. Physicians are there to treat the public, to serve the public, to provide care. That is an essential service. Some of the orders expressly exempt physicians' caregiving services, others don't. Regardless, there has not been any law enforcement against a physician for keeping his office open or providing care to the public. And I don't think there ever will be any law enforcement action against a physician. So in my opinion, as a general matter, it is not proper or lawful for a county executive or the governor of the state to order a physician to stop working and to close his office. So if you have a specific question about a specific order, we can look at it. Usually the orders are written in a way that you can parse it and you can find an exemption for essential services, and the physician can fall under that exemption. So that is usually the practical way to do it. These orders are not shutting down everything. The governor of Pennsylvania, he shut down gun stores, but he did not shut down liquor stores. Okay, that's politics. He knows where his bread is buttered. He wasn't going to shut down the liquor stores because the public would turn against him. He did shut down the gun shops because that's on the other side of the political spectrum from that particular governor. But these orders allow essential services. Physicians are providing essential services. That's sort of the short answer. But here's the catch. Medical boards in many of these states are out to get physicians. So in certain states, the state medical board, which regulates physicians, is looking for an excuse to discipline a physician. And we've got these trolls out there on the internet who are politically motivated. And if they see a physician who's say, doing elective surgery. They hear about it. Maybe it's a competitor of the physician, whoever, and they report that to the state, as just happened in Texas. Orthopedic surgeon was doing elective surgery that he felt was necessary. He got reported to the state medical board, and now he faces a disciplinary action by the state medical board against him. Now, Texas is a red state, but its state medical board is located in Austin, one of the most liberal cities in the country, and it is one of the worst, one of the most anti-physician medical boards in the country. So it's not pleasant to have the Texas medical board going after you if you're a physician. That can happen in Texas if you're doing elective surgery. The governor of Texas has tried to shut that down. He now has a complaint before the medical board he has to deal with. But other states have better medical boards. That's not going to happen to you in Missouri or Pennsylvania or Indiana or Idaho or states which have relatively good medical boards. So part of the lesson here is we're in a crisis, but even in a crisis, the bad medical boards are still bad medical boards looking to go after good doctors. The good medical boards are still the good medical boards, and the only thing that's changed is what the medical board is going to use as an excuse for going after doctors. So that's a state-by-state analysis with respect to elective surgery. I don't think it's going to be an issue anywhere in keeping your office open. I think that you can always argue that that is an essential service. But if it's elective surgery and you're in a state with a bad medical board and the stay-at-home order says don't do any elective surgery, then you may have an issue with your medical board. He's going to win. I mean, the physician who's being harassed, he's going to win that, but he does have to deal with the harassment. So that's the story there on the stay-at-home orders. Then a question arose, well, will someone's professional liability coverage protect him or her if he continues to work during a stay-at-home order and there's a malpractice claim? And the answer there is yes. Your professional liability coverage would still apply because you're exercising your professional judgment to continue to provide care that you felt was essential during this crisis. And indeed, physicians who have office practices, some of the people they see are going to be potential coronavirus victims, and they need to be seen. And the earlier we can catch that, the better. The earlier a physician can diagnose that, the better, and so on. So you will still have your professional liability insurance in place. Now, another question has arisen. Suppose a physician or any business has a business insurance policy that protects them against loss, such as fire, natural disaster, whatever. Are they going to be protected against their loss if they have to shut down? And this has arisen with many businesses, particularly restaurants, where restaurants have just been devastated by this economic shutdown. And so they're filing claims with their insurance carrier and saying, okay, I've lost all this money because no one's come to my restaurant for weeks here and won't come for weeks more. The insurance policy should cover that. Well, probably not, because the insurance companies, many of them put into their policies that to exclude loss due to viruses. Apparently they did that back when there was that SARS epidemic about 15 years ago, and all these insurance companies wised up and put it in their policies that they'll protect against fire and other sorts of disasters, but they do not protect against an epidemic of virus, such as we have here. But people are still pursuing those claims, and we'll see. And if there are physicians here in small practices who've been devastated by this, look at that and look at your policy and see if there's a carve out for virus. And if there isn't, then go ahead and submit a claim. And even if there is, it may be worth thinking about submitting a claim for your losses due to this economic recession that's happened now over the coronavirus. See, there's a number of comments here on the chat bar. Let's take a look at these and see if I addressed any. We'll have a lot of time at the end too. Here we go. Somebody said in New Jersey too, the governor shut down the gun shops but left the liquor stores open. Okay, that's what we're dealing with. Okay, here's another comment that in New York, they're asking physicians to volunteer without pay. How about that? That's involuntary servitude. No, they should not be able to do that. They would not be able to force anyone else to work without pay. The only leverage the state has over physicians is the state medical board. And if somehow the state medical board tried to pass a regulation to force physicians to work without pay, it sure looks unconstitutional to me. I don't think they could do that. I'm not aware of any medical board that does that. So probably you do not have to work without pay, would be my guess. Here we go. In Ohio, yes, another comment coming in from Ohio. It's great having participants from so many different states. Everyone should keep in mind during this episode here that we've never seen before, that a lot of public officials are doing things they do not have authority to do. And we're not used to that. We're used to governors and so on acting within the parameters of their legal authority. Well, right now, there are people who are going beyond their legal authority all over the place. And courts are by and large closed down as well. So we can't get immediate answers from the courts. But participate in these webinars, give me a call, and don't think that just because a governor or somebody else, hospital administrator or someone else says something, that therefore that has force of law, because there's a lot of craziness going on where people are trying to assert authority beyond what they're authorized to do. All right, let's move on now to the third topic in our agenda, which is the right to prescribe off-label. And I assume that all the physicians on this webinar are very familiar with prescribing off-label, and there's no confusion about that, and that physicians have the right to prescribe an approved drug off-label for another use, an unapproved use. In fact, 20% of all prescriptions are for off-label use. 1 out of every 5 prescriptions is an off-label use. And the media has sort of twisted that, and the politicians have twisted that as though an off-label prescription is somehow improper. It's not. There's nothing improper about it at all. And the reason there's so much off-label prescriptions is that when you have a generic medication that was approved long ago for a specific use, there's no financial incentive to pay millions of dollars to study whether it's effective for a new use today. These studies are not done. There's no reason to do them. There's no financial incentive for doing them. It was approved, it's safe, and now someone found that it can be used for a new purpose. And it's safe, so there's no reason not to do it. And as the word gets around and some articles are published, they're not studies, but articles are published that this medication is useful for a new purpose, then physicians and patients have the right to get that medication for the new purpose. So I see the chat bar is going crazy here, but I mean, this is basic for every physician who's on here. Here we go. All of derm is off-label. That's what one physician said here. And I think you can all see these comments. Well, maybe not. These are to the panelists, Jeremy. So I guess the attendees don't see all these comments, but they're pouring in here from our attendees. And we've got a huge crowd now. I really appreciate all the physicians and others who've come on board here for this important webinar. And a bit of humor here. It's great to see all the vectors. That's the new name for a physician, a vector. It's great to see all the vectors here participating. And the reason people are being called vectors is because a vector is someone who carries the disease and supposedly gives the disease to somebody else. So rather than admiring physicians as we should be doing and thanking them as I'm doing right now for your courageous work in combating these diseases and putting your own life at risk, instead, the anti-physician crowd is referring to physicians as vectors who carry the disease. And so this is part of the political backdrop that we have to deal with. The trolls on the internet and so on who are anti-physician and want to bring down good physicians, want to report them to the medical board. Let's just digress here for a second. We have many different types of physicians on this webinar, which is wonderful to have your breadth of knowledge. It will depend on your position how freely you should speak out on the internet about the coronavirus. If you're retired, please speak out far and wide and speak your mind, and you have full First Amendment rights. If you're not retired and you're practicing, that means you're subject to the jurisdiction of your medical board. Be a little more careful. Depends on which state you're in, whether you've got a good medical board or an anti-physician medical board. So be a little more careful. If you're an employee of a hospital, be very careful what you say, because hospitals will fire people, and they've said that publicly. They will fire people if they don't like what the person said on the internet, on social media. So that's sort of our three categories of physicians. You're retired, please speak out far and wide. You're an independent physician, but you're still practicing. If you're in a state with a good medical board, speak out as well. If you're in a state with a bad medical board, be a little careful on social media. When you speak out, don't tie it to anything you're doing in your practice. That's okay. But if you start talking about your practice, if you start saying that you're prescribing medication for coronavirus and so on, and you do that on the internet and you're practicing, you become a bit of a target for the medical board. And if you work for a hospital, you have to be very careful. So I digressed. Back to the off-label prescribing. It's done all the time. It's proper. You can do it. There's no question about it. You can prescribe hydroxychloroquine for coronavirus. That's the medication that many people now are saying that if given early, it's very effective in treating the coronavirus. Trump got the FDA to give an emergency endorsement of that medication. The FDA would not have done that unless the president had told them to. But it's also the medication that some governors have tried to forbid physicians from prescribing off-label. The governor of Nevada has ordered improperly that physicians cannot prescribe hydroxychloroquine for coronavirus unless the patient is in the hospital, unless the patient is hospitalized. Completely improper order by the Nevada governor, who's not a physician. There's no medical background. There's no statutory authorization for that. He's interfering directly in the practice of medicine. And we don't want to wait until patients are in the hospital. We want patients to get the medication as soon as possible to keep them out of the hospital. Why is he doing that? Other governors then followed suit. Democratic governors, by and large. I had on the share here, maybe I'll pull it up here again. So the governor of Michigan, I've pulled it up here on share so you can see it. She issued an order, this was about a week ago, threatening administrative action against doctors who prescribed 2 experimental drugs. It's not an experimental drug. Hydroxychloroquine is an approved drug for malaria, and the off-label use is completely proper to address coronavirus. Well, she said, you do that and you're going to get disciplined, basically is what she said. Now, Michigan, this is why the politics is important to understand. Michigan has a Republican legislature, and unlike Nevada and unlike New York. And so when the Democratic governor of Michigan did this, the Republican legislature in Michigan then pushed back on it and immediately criticized what the governor was doing and took some initiative to get her to reverse it. And she did reverse it. And now she's taking the opposite position where she's begging the federal government to ship more of this medication, hydroxychloroquine, to the state of Michigan so that it can be available there to treat patients there. So the federal government has stockpiled this medication, which governments are good at hoarding. I like hearing how people complain about American citizens who are hoarding. Nobody hoards more than the government. And they've hoarded this medication and it's just sitting there. And people are dying, 1,000 a day now. And government's just hoarding it. They're not getting it out there to the patients. And so even though in most of these states, except where there are these unlawful executive orders, a physician can prescribe this medication off-label for coronavirus to a patient who's not yet in the hospital, will the pharmacist fill the prescription? And in a number of states, including red states, the State Board of Pharmacy has ordered pharmacists not to fill prescriptions for hydroxychloroquine unless certain conditions are met. And the first condition they put in there was there has to be a test proving that the patient has COVID-19. Well, those tests took days initially. And so that was a complete block on filling these prescriptions. Everybody knows tests take days, even if you had access to them. A lot of people don't have access to them. Well, now the tests are getting more and more available. So now the people who are trying to interfere with physicians treating these patients, they came up with other rules. They, well, you can't do it unless the patient's hospitalized. That's a terrible rule. No precedent for that. No precedent whatsoever. Say there has to be a diagnosis on the prescription. Well, that can be done, but that's unprecedented. That's not required for other prescriptions. There has to be a billing code on the prescriptions. Well, I think the AMA's finally come out with a billing code. They were slow on that. So there is that issue of, even though the physicians can write the prescription for this medication, there's a big question mark as to whether the pharmacists will fill it. And so we got these comments on this chat bar. Look at this, Jeremy. Got all this stuff. Everybody's commenting. All these doctors are typing in. Here we go. We got a physician right here. Arizona, this inexpensive medication is not available to prescribe where he is in Arizona. Right. You can't get it. You can't get it. It's stockpiled. Government has it. It's inexpensive. It's easy to make. It's a little synthetic, generic medication that's easy for anyone to manufacture, any pharmaceutical company manufacturer. They could pump out 100 million doses of these things within a week. Everybody in our country could be given them. And that would stop this crisis overnight, most likely. Just give it to everybody. In India, they are giving this medication, hydroxychloroquine, to healthcare workers who are potentially exposed to the virus. They're doing that in India, to all the healthcare workers. They're protecting the healthcare workers in India, unlike this country. In South Korea, they gave it. That's how South Korea, you look at the numbers in South Korea of mortalities, they're so much better than what we've been able to do here in the United States. Even though we're more advanced in our medical system, we're more prosperous. In South Korea, they've handled this crisis a lot better. They didn't stockpile this drug. They don't interfere with it. You don't have county executives placing orders that get in the way of prescribing. You don't have governors getting in the way of this. And the reason governors get away with it is because of this political overlay here. So how do you deal with this as a physician? Jeremy, this chat thing, it's unbelievable. All the doctors expressing outrage here. All right. Don't forget quinine, one person said here. Well, if you can get it, if you can get it. So quinine is, I believe that's over the counter, but I don't know if anybody can get it. And we're not recommending that people self-medicate here. Here's a point about tonic water. There's some debate about that, whether tonic water has enough in it. These are fascinating issues, but I'm gonna sort of stick to the legal issues here. Here's a question: can we sue these governors who are interfering with hydroxychloroquine, which has a strong track record of successful treatment of the coronavirus? Can these governors be sued? Not fast enough, not fast enough. The courts are not generally open for business either. They've shut down too. And this virus is killing 1,000 people a day now. And you can't get in there in a court and get an order fast enough. And a lot of these judges, of course, they have political views too. And this thing has been politicized. And if the judges view this as somehow a Trump medication or something, then they're not going to rule in favor of a lawsuit that attempts to open up the use of it. So one physician gave me the tip that when he encounters a pharmacist who refuses to fill his prescription, what he does, and this is the kind of tip that physicians on the call may appreciate, and you may try this. Now, if he's out of the medication, as a physician just said from Arizona, that I don't know if there's anything you can do. But if he has the medication but refuses to fill your prescription, then an approach is to tell the pharmacist, all right, I want your name and I want your pharmacist license number, and I'm going to put that in the medical record that you denied this treatment for this patient. So now it's on you. I prescribed it in my medical judgment. It's been successful. France, China, South Korea, India, certain physicians reported their success in the United States, their published article success. I've prescribed it. You have refused to fill the prescription. Your name, your pharmacy license number is going in the medical record as denying this care. And the physician said when he takes that approach, usually the pharmacist switches his position and fills the prescription. So that's a little practical tip, which we need a lot of that right now with the courts closed and people doing things they're not authorized to do as public officials and all this intimidation and bullying. That's a little practical tip you might try. There was a report in the newspaper the other day that somebody in New Jersey, the way he got this medication, hydroxychloroquine, was he had coronavirus and he was fading fast. And you can die in a few days with this virus. He's fading fast. His wife got it from Taiwan. He then called his doctor and asked his doctor in New Jersey, whom I don't know, but this was reported in the newspaper, and asked his doctor if he should take this. And his doctor said, yes, but you didn't hear that from me. I did not prescribe it. This is how afraid physicians are now. The physician said, I didn't prescribe it to you. Yes, you should take it, but you didn't hear that from me. He took it and he recovered. The patient took it and recovered. Now, as an organization, we cannot recommend that. The laws are very murky about getting medication from overseas. We're not endorsing that as an organization. But the story, which was published in the newspaper, does illustrate the intimidation that physicians are feeling, and that's improper. So those of you on this call who are state legislators, and I know we have several who are in that category, to the extent you can do something about this, and you can do it in your state, you're probably going to have better numbers when this is all over. If your state protects the physician's ability to prescribe this medication. It does not matter that it's off label. And I hope none of the chat comments question that, because that's pretty clear. But you'll get trolls on the internet who say, no, you can't do that. No, that's off label. The article I just put up there and shared with everybody said it's an experimental drug. It's not an experimental drug. Hydroxychloroquine was approved decades ago. It's not experimental. It's like any other generic drug. So it's perfectly lawful to do this. It's unlawful for anyone to interfere with it. Now we got in Ohio, the Ohio Medical Board, again, a red state, with a governor, DeWine, who's supposed to be a conservative, free market kind of guy. But you get on these medical boards, you get people who are very tyrannical, even in red states. And the medical boards usually sit in the capital. It's the capital city, and they're not. The governor often doesn't even know what they're doing on the medical board. And it can be the opposite of what the governor is saying. Governor will stand up there and say, yeah, free market, free enterprise, this and that. Medical board in Ohio said, if anyone has prescribed hydroxychloroquine to a family member or colleague, then we want you to self-report yourself to us now so we can discipline you. That's what the Ohio Medical Board said. No authority for it. No justification. And they're telling physicians to turn themselves in if they have dared to prescribe this potentially life-saving medication to a family member or a colleague. Just terrible. I mean, there should be legal accountability for state officials who are doing this. I've urged the Trump administration to prohibit this sort of interference with care during this crisis, but the Trump administration has not yet taken that action. Here we go, another comment here. CVS will not fill it. Hydroxychloroquine. Here someone says CVS will not fill it. Unbelievable. President of Brazil, he tweeted the other day that hydroxychloroquine is effective in treating coronavirus, COVID-19, problem solved. Brazil has had fewer than 1 in a million mortalities due to COVID-19, much better record than the United States, much poorer country, much better record. President of Brazil says, yep, you think you have coronavirus there in his country, COVID-19, you get this medication, you'll be fine. Not going to be any interference with in Brazil. So he tweeted that out, put it on Facebook, and Facebook deleted his post. Deleted his posting of that information. Can you believe that? So we're getting censorship too. This crisis has now emboldened Facebook and Twitter, Google too, to censor people, even the president of Brazil, that's one of the largest countries in the world, to censor even the president of Brazil in order to maintain a certain narrative that some people want about this disease. So that's what we're up against. But we will keep at it. So what's the next topic here? Interference by pharmacy boards and medical boards. I've addressed that. Now, we would have the FDA in the act too. The FDA interferes more than anybody. And we'll get to them in another agenda item. But the Trump administration has basically told the FDA to behave itself. So it's not the real problem here at this particular time with respect to this medication. So they did issue this order that said that hydroxychloroquine is approved for treating COVID-19. So if anybody, any of the physicians on this webinar get any flack for it, so, oh, that's unapproved use, which is just nonsense anyway. But you need to find, no, the FDA has approved it for this. If you look at how the FDA wrote their order, though, they tried to make it as difficult as possible for physicians, and they watered their order down, and they said, well, you can do it if you don't have access to an FDA approved trial, clinical trial, then you can do it and you have no other choice and stuff. So they tried to dilute it as much as they could in the fine print. Pathetic trial. We don't have time for a trial. We've got Governor Cuomo in New York. He said, we're going to do a trial. So he stockpiled a bunch of hydroxychloroquine, tens of thousands of doses. He's got enough doses. The governor of New York, Cuomo, has enough doses to treat all the people who have coronavirus in New York, but he's not doing it. He says, no, we're going to have a trial first. It'll take weeks and weeks. And then he said the trial is going to start. It's supposed to start last week. It didn't start. Got delayed. The clinical trial hasn't even started. Maybe it started just now, but the time warm weather hits and all these people die, all that's going to happen before there are any results from a trial. And then I'm sure they'll say it's inconclusive and so on. So let's see what else we got here on the chat. We'll have time at the end for questions. So I need to keep moving here. Time's getting away from me. All right, let's move to the next agenda item here. Interference by the FDA with tests, ventilators, and medication. They certainly did that. And we've heard presentations, maybe you have too, about how the FDA, the CDC, they were going to have their own test. And that's how we got behind the curve on this thing. But the government can't produce a product. I mean, there's no way the government can make a commercially viable product. You need the free market to do that. So there's no way they were going to have a test, but they've interfered with other people's tests. So it's difficult. Even now, it's getting better with tremendous pressure to get a test for this, but the delay was very harmful, obviously. Ventilators, we can't get enough ventilators because they all have to be FDA approved. So you're not going to get enough. So we've got Elon Musk going over to China to try to get ventilators because you don't have enough in this country because they have to be FDA approved. That's why. All right, let's move on to this PPP issue, and that's the equipment for the personal protection of physicians, the masks and so on. And hospitals are not providing the masks. They're not, hospitals are being asked to go in harm's way, and they're not being provided the gear and the protection for that. Now, one approach to that on a practical level is, obviously you're an employee of a hospital, you're stuck, you have to do what the hospital says, but you can argue that you're protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act if you have any immunocompromised characteristics of yourself that require protection. So the hospital has to provide the equipment that you need to protect yourself, the mask. If they won't do it, you should be able to wear your own. So if you can cite any of your own immunocompromised characteristics or anyone in your household. So even if you're very healthy, if you got someone in your household who's immunocompromised, then make that argument to the hospital. And then maybe they'll allow you to bring in your own mask, even though many hospitals are trying to forbid that. And they're trying to forbid people, they'll say you can wear the mask in the hallway, but you can't wear the mask when you see the patient. Well, again, make a disabilities argument and say you're vulnerable to this, either personally or someone in your household, and try to talk to another administrator in the hospital about it. Maybe get over to the personnel department or the legal department about this, how you need protection, or else there's going to be some harm for which the hospital may be liable for that. So that's an approach on that issue. Another thing is you may be carrying the virus. And if you're carrying the virus, you don't want to spread it to other people. So if you can cite any reason why you think you may be carrying the virus, well, then I guess they may give you a test. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe if you just say you may be carrying, you're asymptomatic, but you're concerned you may be spreading it, then maybe they'll let you have your own mask. People are making masks. I mean, the volunteers are making masks for healthcare workers. So they're available. The problem is hospitals forbidding people from wearing them. Just the breaking news here was that in New Jersey, our federal government seized a huge number of masks. They said someone was hoarding. Well, it wasn't that many masks. And the biggest hoarder is the federal government and the state governments. These masks, they're out there, but the governments are not distributing them to people, and hospitals are not allowing caregivers to wear them. All right, let's move to telemedicine. Spend a few minutes on that. The federal government and the states have loosened many of the restrictions on telemedicine. So in many states, not all, there was a requirement of an in-person visit initially, such as Texas. You had to have an in-person consultation first, and then you could go the telemedicine route. But then when you went the telemedicine route, it had to be over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or something like that. You had to see the patient. This was fairly burdensome. Well, Texas, like many other states, they've relaxed that now. And they say you don't need an initial in-person visit during this crisis. And you don't necessarily need to see the patient over some video hookup, because someone pointed out that tens of millions of Americans don't have a video hookup over the internet. So you can do it over phone. Just document in the medical record that the patient did not have access to video, so you consult it over the phone. These rules are different in every state, so you do sort of need to consult the website of your state medical board about what your rules are. But in general, states have waived that in-person initial visit. So telemedicine's an opportunity now for physicians to have consultations with patients. Insurance has to carry it, has to cover it, and so on. And Medicare has relaxed many of its restrictions as well, where they now require reimbursement for telemedicine consultations where they did not before. Be sure to document as much as you can. That's important in case there's ever an issue, but I've not heard of any issues with this. This is being encouraged across the board. The one thing I would urge some caution on is if it's a Medicaid patient, you're not going to get reimbursed much anyway. And maybe don't try to bill for Medicaid unless you're absolutely sure you've followed all the guidelines on that. Beware of some of the hype where a politician will get out there and say that, oh yeah, we're allowing it, we've waived those regulations and everything, and then you believe that, and then you find out, well, they really didn't. And they are still a lot of regulations in place, and they're going to try to nail you on one of those. Again, it comes down a lot to whether you're in a state with a good medical board or a bad medical board. You're not going to get nailed by anyone else for telemedicine except by your own state's medical board. So that's going to depend on where you are. If you're billing for it, that could be another issue that gets you into trouble, where you have to be careful that you can bill for it. But a lot of those rules have been relaxed as well. So it's a state by state analysis, and we'll put out some information on that. Keep in touch with AAPS about it so you know what you can do. All right, we're going to open this up in a second here for questions. My final agenda item is, are we seeing a permanent loss of liberty? Permanent losses due to this coronavirus crisis, and I think maybe we are. And are we seeing a shift in control of the medical profession? And I think maybe we are, and we're going to be vigilant against that. The good news is, as physicians, there's still a huge shortage of physicians that's worsening in this country, and medical schools are getting more difficult to get into, and the medical degree and license is becoming an even more valuable license to have. So that's the positive note to end this on. You're still in huge demand as a physician, even more so. And even though there are all these pressures to try to get control of you, at the end of the day, we need you. And so take hope and heart in that. So that point, Jeremy, let's open this up for questions.
Okay, terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Schlafly, for that very informative presentation. Yeah, we have a number of questions here, and it looks like most of you have figured out how to ask a question. Yeah, if you'd like to verbally ask your question, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. When I go to you, you'll see a little notification on your screen asking you to confirm that you'd like to be unmuted. And so we'll take some verbal questions here momentarily. If you're dialed in only, *9 should raise your hand. If you're on the phone only and want to ask a question, *9. Okay, so let's go to some questions. I have one here online that just asked. There's a number of people that have asked this. Can the pharmacist or governor who denies the patient the ability to get one of these drugs be charged with negligent homicide? There's a couple variations of that question, but they're all basically along the same lines.
I mean, I think it is a terrible thing they're doing. And I think we're seeing thousands of unnecessary deaths because of it. As a private citizen, we cannot charge anybody with a crime. So it'd have to be someone in the state who starts charging people. I will say some of the data that just came out of Michigan is that there's a racial bias to who's dying, and that African Americans are dying at a much higher rate than whites are. And there's going to be outrage about that. And so, but we can't charge people with crimes. So you just have to get a good prosecutor who's elected in most states to try to bring some of those charges.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to try to take a spoken question here. This is Dr. Lee Vliet, a former board member of AAPS. I'm going to try to unmute her here. Dr. Vliet, please go ahead after you click the unmute button on your side.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I'll talk quickly because I have to do a national interview on this very subject of hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin in about 5 minutes, which I've been doing all day, having written an editorial about the governor problem. But I do want to comment that the Arizona situation is updated because I just had a patient in Phoenix that I insisted needed to have a test for coronavirus yesterday, and they turned her down because they said her symptoms were atypical and would not take my authorization. This was the screening procedure at the testing site. So they insisted that she have a telehealth consult with a physician today. And that turned out to be extremely beneficial because he took my statement that she was high risk and that she had atypical symptoms, and he did an interview with her, and he immediately prescribed hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin protocol that Dr. Zelenko in New York is using and Dr. Stephen Smith is using. So my patient got the prescription for coronavirus as an outpatient early in the treatment, which is when it's most effective, according to all the studies I've been reviewing for the last 2 months. And what I was pleased to see is that I do think the situation on the ground in Arizona may be changing. And with the FDA emergency use authorization, we're on a little more solid ground in prescribing it early, and that is what the basic science and the clinical studies from worldwide are showing is the time that you need to do it. And that's what Dr. Stephen Smith was saying last night, that the earlier the treatment is, the better. So I think what we may be looking at, Andy, if we can't get through pressure on the President Trump, who I think is open to all of this, if we can't get pressure on these governors that way, we may have to look at AAPS looking at an emergency injunction filing, because more and more data is showing clearly that the earlier the intervention, the sooner the combination, particularly hydroxychloroquine, prevents entry of the virus into the cells and prevents viral replication and reduces the viral load, reduces the duration of infectivity. So I just wanted to share all that with everybody. And that I was encouraged that my patient had such a great experience with the telemedicine doc, and I called him to thank him. So just
Very
letting you
good.
know.
Very good, Dr. Vliet. And Arizona has been a pioneer in the telemedicine and in waiving a lot of the restrictions that used to be there. And so you're in a good state for that, Dr. Vliet. Dr. Vliet writes a column that I just reviewed one on. I think it was published by WorldNet Daily. It was just excellent on all these issues. So thank you, Dr. Vliet.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Vliet. Now, just a comment here from the Q&A queue. This is a comment to ask your professional liability carrier to confirm your telemedicine coverage. Many carriers are now allowing treatment, especially COVID-19 treatment with any state, but you need to check with your malpractice, your professional liability carrier, this commenter suggests. Any feedback on that, Mr. Schlafly?
That's an excellent point.
Okay, so let's go back to a caller here. Let's see, we got Dr. Wax, Dr. Craig Wax. I'm going to unmute you, and you'll have to also unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
All right, thanks for that. I just found out about the conference, so I'm sorry I tuned in late. I appreciate Andy Schlafly's comments and your judicious hosting, Jeremy. Thank you for that. I just wanted to mention quickly to dovetail onto what Andy was saying, that just today we published a letter, and we had over 20 physicians signed on it, and some of them AAPS members, with regard to the New Jersey governor limiting physicians' ability to prescribe hydroxychloroquine. The said concern is that they're afraid that people will hoard it, or people with, arthritis can't get it, yada, yada, which I think are unfounded, but that's what they say. Having said all of that, the governor passed a rule that said you can only use it with a positive nasal culture. And we all know that nasal cultures don't turn positive until 3 or 4 weeks into the disease, when you're in the ICU, and hydroxychloroquine may be contraindicated at that point. So it's basically inadvertent. I don't know, but it to me, it's sentencing people to be sicker and to risk death. And it's been an issue because he headed everybody off at the pharmacy, because I actually sent a prescription last night, just basically after the whole thing came down. And the pharmacist called me and said, unless you have a positive on this and you write that on the script, that I can't fill it. Now, I don't know that anybody's actually checking it, frankly and honestly, or how they would even do that. But basically, they've limited our ability to treat. And as Dr. Vliet said, that you've got to treat early in this disease. And we all know that from the conference calls we've been feverishly having every week for the last 8. So the letter that a lot of people signed on to, I put a copy up on the chat if you'd like it. Senator Joe Panaccio from the New Jersey Senate is actually one of the few good guys who's actually championing this cause, and he has for weeks. And we're trying to put it to them, but I think it may have to come to a lawsuit. And I don't know, as you were saying, Andy, what the state would do about it with regard, or whether it would have to come from without. And I know that, you practice in New Jersey.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on the possibility of AAPS taking an action or recommending someone else to take that action?
Well, we would look for a venue that could go beyond the politics of this issue. And I don't know that New Jersey would be the best place to bring that action. Maybe in a redder state, maybe a court would be more receptive to it. But I don't know, Craig, that a court in New Jersey would rule against the governor on this. So the thing has become politicized, unfortunately. And it's sort of, if you're pro-Trump, you feel one way about it, and if you're anti-Trump, you feel the other way about it. And we're talking about medication here that should not be politicized, but it has been. So that's regrettable. We've got a legislator here from Idaho, and maybe Idaho could fill all these prescriptions. How about that, Tammy? Maybe we could get some pharmacies in red states that could advertise that they'll take these prescriptions, fill them, and ship them to your state. Would that work?
Well, I wonder, because I know Texas, Chris Held has been working on getting production ramped up there in Texas.
Right.
So
Sure.
I'm going to break in as a timekeeper. There is CME available for today's presentation, and we have met for an hour. Mr. Schlafly has generously agreed to stay until 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. So we will keep going on with questions, but I want to just break in here briefly to say thank you all for attending tonight, and keep an eye out. This is the first in a series, and we'll be putting on webinars every other week on important topics. And as you can tell, the kind of material that you heard tonight is material that's not going to be presented by any other medical society. So thank you to Mr. Schlafly. Thank you to Jeremy for organizing, and we'll keep going with questions.
Yeah, so Bob's saying you can get your CME credit now. Jeremy, do you want to just tell them how to do that if they want? I think there's a link or an email
Yeah,
and you get your CME credit.
So yeah, actually, after we wrap up tonight, when we're done, I will send an email to everybody who participated in tonight with the link to fill out a very short evaluation for the meeting that you need to fill out in order to get the certificate. So just keep your eye out for an email a little bit later tonight on exactly how that will work for getting your certificate. All right, thank you. We do have a couple of similar questions here. And shifting gears slightly here for just a minute, this is bioethics committees are activated to decide who gets ventilatory support and who does not. What are the implications? And then there's a related question. What is the ethical issue and legality of unilaterally enforced DNR orders for hospitalized patients? Is that rationing of care, essentially?
Yeah, it certainly is, and we've seen that. In one of the states, there's already a request for blanket authorization of do not resuscitate orders for these patients who are going to be hospitalized. This is the model of socialized medicine that people have been pushing for years. You get people in the hospital, then you ration care, do not resuscitate the older ones, and get to play God, basically. And we oppose this. We oppose this completely at AAPS. We want to, in this situation, we want to try to keep people out of hospitals. We do not think a state should be issuing a blanket DNR for everybody, so that anyone who gets stuck in a hospital with coronavirus has an automatic DNR, do not resuscitate, even though they did not personally authorize that. Do not resuscitate orders should only be authorized by the patient, not by a politician. That's our position. We'll keep fighting for it.
Okay, thank you for those questions. All right, we're going to go to another question here from participants. And Dr. Cole, I'm going to unmute you here. Let's see. Yeah, please click your mute and then go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking my question. So I run a private laboratory in Idaho, so it's nice to know another Idahoan is on this call. We're doing antibody testing for the virus, and it's authorized under the Emergency Use Act under serology testing in Section D. Our state laboratory says they're only following CDC PCR guidelines. They won't accept our data in terms of reporting. And, you know, we are reporting lots of positive patients. I've seen 1,000 in the last couple of days. 5% of people are now positive. I actually have one of the few studies in the nation now. I have the prevalence data. The prevalence of this disease is 5% in our population currently here. My question is, and half of those patients are asymptomatic. So they're the silent spreaders of the disease. My question is, the state won't accept our data to add to the public reporting. Should I remain silent about that? Because I've been vocal and public in my newspaper about it. We have thousands of patients clamoring. Only the sickest of patients can get PCR testing. And again, as was alluded to earlier, PCR testing is only positive in certain phases of this virus. You may have the disease. Antibodies will actually tell you when you're mounting an immune response to it. So two answers, I guess. Should the state accept my data? And given that it's an antibody test, should the doctors be able to prescribe based on the report that I'm giving to them of a positive result so they can treat their patients? If the state's not accepting it, yeah.
The state should accept it, and you should be able to prescribe. Doctors should be able to prescribe based on your data. And Tammy Nichols is a state representative there. I see her on
Tammy,
the
I'd love to
attendees.
be in touch with you, Tammy, if you want to reach out to Dr. Cole here. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll put you in touch with each other, and that's something I guess the governor of Idaho could do. And wouldn't it be wonderful if a state like Idaho became a leader on this?
We'll be published in JAMA next month.
Boy, that's fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Cole.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So let's see, we have another caller here, and this is a 214 area code. I think this is Dallas.
It is, yes.
Okay, caller from 214, please go ahead. And let's see, you may need to type *6 on your phone to unmute yourself. Or here, let me see if I can do that. Yeah, please, yeah, you may be unmuted now, sorry. Oh, let's try that again. Go for it.
No, he's muted, it says. There we go. There we go. No, do it again.
Sorry.
There.
All right, let's try that. Thank you. Caller, are you there? Looks like he's trying to talk here. We'll
keep trying, and let's go to someone else.
Yeah, we'll come back to you here momentarily, okay? All right, let's go to Dr. Liegner, Dr. Ken Liegner. Please go ahead.
Hi there.
Hi, Ken.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
I sent you a PDF of an article in the Wall Street Journal from yesterday, reporting that in the ICUs at Montefiore, nurses and doctors are being compelled to take care of these very, very, very ill patients with completely inadequate personal protection. And some of them are falling ill, some of them are in themselves ending up on ventilators. And where is the liability, and how has it come to pass that these hospital systems, whether they are private corporations or they're public hospitals, can get away with compelling this kind of service and failing to provide adequate protective gear? Where's the liability for that? And, you know, it puts the practitioners in a terrible ethical and moral bind.
It does, Kenneth, and I read that article, and it's shocking how nurses and physicians are being put in harm's way here. And we've got hospital administrators who are making a ton of money personally, and they are not protecting the workers who are actually doing the work. I've sued a number of hospitals over my career. It's difficult to sue a hospital. Increasingly, these hospitals act like they're above the law and above accountability. And I think it's that mindset that's causing them to behave this way. Hospitals have been abusive of physicians for a long time, Kenneth. It's gotten worse. And now we're seeing it right here in this crisis, how abusive hospitals are of physicians. And everyone on this call who's thinking about becoming an employee of a hospital or has made that transition to become an employee of a hospital, as many physicians have, this puts it into perspective, perhaps, that maybe that's not such a great thing where physicians become employees of hospitals. So there is a downside to being an employee. So thank you, Kenneth, for being independent, and all the other physicians on this call who are independent of hospitals, because we rely on you for your medical judgment. So thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I think we may have another, at least a former state legislator here, Dr. Ritz. Let's see. Let's try going to Dr. Ritz.
Yeah, absolutely. There, Oklahoma. Ritz? Good to see you, Dr. Ritz. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation, Andy and Jeremy. It's quite interesting. I have two children that are physicians, one an anesthesiologist, one is a critical care pulmonologist. And we contacted one of the studies, a comment first and then a question. We contacted one of the clinical studies at the University of Minnesota about whether cancer patients who are immune suppressed and on chemo can participate. And they said, no, they cannot participate in the study. A simple question maybe to some other physicians here or whatever is being recommended, but up to date, the source up to date said there's two types of treatments with the hydroxychloroquine. One is the standard, which I've used for years for patients as missionaries and malaria and so on and so forth. The one dose is the standard dosage, and then there's the loaded dosage. I didn't know which one was preferential.
We have had a lot of chat about what the best protocol is, and we can get that out to you, Dr. Ritz. I'm not in a position really to recommend a particular protocol. I know Dr. Zelenko in New York has had success with 700 patients, and he has a particular protocol of how much dosage to use, and maybe someone will put it up here on the chat line. So many physicians here who feel competent to recommend a particular protocol, but I don't feel like I'm in a position to do that from where I'm sitting in my background. But Dr. Ritz, we'll certainly get that to you, the opinions about the best protocol. And I know Dr. Zelenko gave a superb presentation earlier this week. He feels strongly that he has pretty much optimized the protocol, and it's like 5 days, it's $20 a day. And 695 out of 699 patients recovered and stayed out of the hospital. And none of his patients, none of his 699 coronavirus patients have died from it.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ritz. I'm not seeing any more raised hands right now, so please, if you'd like to raise your hand to ask a question verbally, we'll go back to the Q&A room here. A couple people want to know about what the worst medical boards are and the best medical boards are in the country.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I prepared a list here. I've got 25 years of experience in dealing with these state medical boards, and I was preparing my talk. I sort of prepared a list of which were the worst and which were the best. And here we go. I found it here. So the worst medical boards in my 25 years of experience are in these states: Oregon, Washington, Louisiana, Texas, New York, Maine, Maryland, Alabama, and Ohio. Those are the worst. The best ones, I can think of 3 here. In general, the rural states are better, but the 3 that come to mind as being the best medical boards are Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Missouri. And if you sort of want to ask me why some of these some are good and some are bad and so on, and that requires a little political analysis and a little history. I can tell you Pennsylvania, the reason it's good is because Pennsylvania state courts are willing to rule against the state medical board. In Texas, the state courts in Texas are generally not willing to rule against the medical board. So you get kind of a above the law mentality of the Texas Medical Board. They sit in Austin, one of the most liberal cities in the country. There's a lot of rivalry in Texas. There's a lot of people feel that they're underpaid in state government. The court system there in Austin tends to protect the medical board. We had a lawsuit against the Texas Medical Board for years, and we felt that we exposed some of the misconduct and some of the abuse of physicians, and it is better because of that. But if you're in a state with a bad medical board, you do have to be a little more careful. Jeremy?
Okay, thank you. Yep, let's see. We have another raised hand here from one of our past presidents, Dr. Merritt. Dr. Merritt, are you there?
There, am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Well, I just had a comment, but I had a question. The first comment is, I was in the Navy for 10 years. We would never send any private in the Marine Corps into the jungle where there's malaria without malaria prophylaxis. And I just cannot believe that we're not protecting our frontline people. You know, that's just unbelievable. For 2 pills a day of this hydroxychloroquine, we could protect people. And we've had horrible, you know, the Italians found out that they just spread it all over the place when they didn't do that, because doctors are super spreaders. EMTs are super spreaders. I mean, it's just insane. But the question I have is, you know, we've been fighting against mandatory vaccinations for years. And now that I think it's pathetic, especially at the VA. This came out in the Disabled Veterans magazine. They're upset about this, but now that they've shown that flu vaccination increases your risk of coronavirus, of acquiring the virus, by about 36%. And it was a good study. I read the study, and it was out in January of this year. So they knew about it. CDC has quietly removed that flu vaccine, you know, push off their webpage, but the VA is still pushing it. And all these people working in hospitals now were forced to take the flu vaccine. And I'm thinking of my son, who's a 5th-year general surgery resident, and it makes me just sick to think what risk we've put people in, and they couldn't get out of it. You know, they could not avoid the vaccine in order to stay employed and be a resident. Is that something we can think about doing something about? I mean, I think that's something that needs to be stood up against.
That's a great point, Lee. Thanks for mentioning that. And we do get a lot of complaints from physicians every year about being forced to take that flu vaccine. And here, as you point out, it can actually be counterproductive and can actually worsen the coronavirus situation. So we'll use that argument in the future. And coronavirus may not be the last one. That's what's scary about this crisis. We may be seeing a crisis every year. We have a different.
Well, and if I could add one thing, they said, the chief medical officer of Britain says, if you've taken the flu vaccine, you need to self-isolate for 12 weeks because we consider you now high risk. Now think about that. That would be our whole medical staff everywhere.
Wow.
So,
Right.
Just a point. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Merritt. Really appreciate you calling in tonight, being here with us. Yeah, so here's another couple people had this question in the Q&A forum concerning how Texas is banning almost every elective procedure except for abortion. Well, a court overruled Texas's ban for abortion, yet other elective procedures are still banned. Any feedback on that?
Well, right. And we're seeing that sort of favoritism when we have these shutdowns and bans. We're seeing favoritism for certain politically powerful groups. And that's why these shutdowns are inappropriate, to pick and choose about what can continue and what can't. And by the way, that decision of the district court in favor of the abortion clinics, that went up right away to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and the Fifth Circuit reversed the district court and reinstated the ban on abortion clinics and said, no, you don't get a special advantage here in all this. But it's for government to start picking and choosing what services shut down and which ones don't. This is a terrible precedent, I think, and we're getting a lot of terrible precedents in this crisis, aren't we? I mean, there's going to be a lot of pushback. And I think the sooner we start pushing back on some of the exploitation of this crisis, the better.
Okay, thank you. All right, so yeah, we have a number of other questions here. So if everyone could just try to be as succinct as possible here, we'll try to get to everybody. Okay, we're going to go to Dr. Thomas, Dr. Jim Thomas. Hold on here, let me unmute you. All right, you should be ready to go, Dr. Thomas.
Thanks very much. Great. Thanks very much. Great presentation. Mr. Schlafly, the virus may mutate. And one of the protocols is to give low dose early and continue it on for a week, 1 pill a week, and possibly change it, since the half-life of hydroxychloroquine is 22 days, possibly change that to once every 2 weeks or 3 weeks, because this virus is known to mutate and then goes through you as if you've never seen the virus before and can send you back into the ICU. What are your thoughts on that? And is this long-term prophylaxis? We're going to have to get the country back going again. With this long-term prophylaxis, couldn't we get the country going very quickly? It's not prophylaxis. I guess it's early treatment.
Yeah, someone pointed out that for a cost of just a few $billion in giving everyone hydroxychloroquine, we could save trillions of dollars that we're wasting right now with this shutdown of the economy and the bailout and all that. Just give this medication to everyone. I'll point out that Chris Cuomo on CNN, he's talking about how he's come down with coronavirus and all this publicity about that, how he's come down with it, but he doesn't say what medication he's taking for. And it seems likely to me that he's taken hydroxychloroquine, the same medication that his brother, the governor of New York, is forbidding other people from getting access to. And most recently, Chris Cuomo said that he's suffering from hallucinations. Well, I asked the physicians out here on this webinar, hallucinations, isn't that a side effect of hydroxychloroquine? And yet Chris Cuomo won't tell us what medication he's taking while he sits comfortably at home to recover from coronavirus and does not step foot in any of those hospitals that New York is trying to impose on everybody else.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thomas. So we're going to go to Dr. Corrigan. Dr. Corrigan, please go ahead.
Jeremy, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh my gosh, and Andrew, you're just phenomenal. And this AAPS is just an amazing organization and group. And thank you, everyone, for your sage advice. I just had a comment regarding this. You had commented that, that there are persons taking advantage of this crisis, quote unquote. And I just want to say, as it regards to the CARES Act and all of the money, billions, that has been set out for loans for small businesses, medium businesses, that also includes loans to employers who employ us. They use us. Mm-hmm. They use us. They don't protect us. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to have to come around on the back end of things and, make sure that they have, not abused the loans that they take out in our name, because already you'll have physicians who get, I saw an email that came my way, from one of the hospitals that I have privileges at, just regarding, oh, hey, our volume's down in whatever area, so we're gonna downsize this area. And they're not taking advantage of the loans that have been set out for, not them really, but for physicians and workers and those who are employed and taking care of people, that sort of thing. They are not, I've seen them already. They've started to lay off people, and the loans were set out for them to keep persons employed. But I just wanted to share with you one thing that I heard. The UAPD, the union in California, their legal counsel at unioncounsel.net, they commented on this point, that regarding loans to medium-sized businesses, which is 500 to 10,000 employees. This is an important point in that there's a good faith certification. That means that they have to remain neutral in any union organizing effort during the term of the loan. Mm-hmm. So I want to say that in terms of these loans that are going out, those business persons and CEOs that are still getting their salary, they don't care about us, not really. And I think we really have to, it's important to acknowledge what they're not doing for those physicians and those treating patients. And it's also going to be important to go back and see who got this money, mm-hmm. What did they do with it, and how was it used, mm-hmm. And those sorts of terms. But the fact that they aren't allowed to fight against us in terms of our unionizing efforts, I think is very important. But that's all I had to say, but I just want to thank you so much. Thank you both.
Thank you, Dr. Corrigan. Very well put.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Corrigan. All right, we are going to go to another past president of AAPS here, Dr. Tom Kendall. Dr. Kendall, please go ahead. Are you there, Dr. Kendall?
It says mute. You have to unmute, Tom.
Let me try unmuting him. Yeah, you should be getting a notification to that. Unmute yourself.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation, Andy. And could you address just generically and perhaps specifically how you think our president is responding to what he's hearing? And should he be hearing other things and having different responses?
I think he should be hearing other things, Tom. I think his instincts are good. And he's going up against the entrenched public health apparatus, the FDA, the CDC. Those are some of the most powerful agencies in government. And he's going up against that, and that's hard. So I sympathize with it. I wish he had some advisors who could tell him that if he just got this medication out to these people who are sick, and if he just issued some executive orders that prohibited state governors and agencies and medical boards from getting in the way of physicians on this, then we could have this crisis over much sooner and with much lower mortality and cost than we're looking at right now. But what I think President Trump doesn't realize is that even though the FDA said you can use hydroxychloroquine now, that there's still all these other players in this entrenched public health apparatus that's getting in the way. And the medication is not getting to the patient. So it's horrific seeing these fatalities mount and all these people die when all they needed to get probably was some early medication, and someone's gotten in the way of that. And the medication's sitting in some warehouses somewhere, and everyone's posturing for political reasons and so on. So I do wish President Trump had some better advisors on this, Tom.
All right. Thank you, Andy.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Kendall. Let's see. Well, we are at the top of the hour here. We've gone for about 90 minutes. There are still a number of questions in the Q&A room and a few people with hands raised.
And the chat too.
Yeah,
well,
and the chat.
Going.
So
yeah, let's keep going longer, Jeremy, if it's all right with you.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine with me. That's fine with me here.
And I can look at some of these chat comments that are interesting. Yeah, here's someone talking about Fauci. I mean, Anthony Fauci, just so everybody knows, it's come out through WikiLeaks that Anthony Fauci was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. And we all know what Hillary Clinton's views are on medicine. We sued Hillary Clinton way back in 1993, her whole task force, with her whole socialized medicine approach. And that's where Anthony Fauci is on these issues. So why is he running the country? Go ahead, Jeremy.
All right, thank you. And here's an interesting comment in the Q&A room. It says, by the way, the Federal PrEP Act from several years ago gives extensive immunity to doctors providing approved drugs for unapproved uses, as long as the Secretary of HHS has declared an emergency. That's interesting. I had not heard that. And we'll look for some more information on that. Thank you for that.
Very good.
That tip there. Okay, let's see. We have another hand raised here. We're going to go to Dr. Severin. Dr. Severin, I believe in Ohio.
Sure. Chris, good to hear from you again. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
So Chris, we've known Chris going back 25 years.
Yeah. Are you there, Dr. Severin? It looks like you're unmuted on our side here. Maybe you have a mute on your cell phone or your phone or on your computer, your mic maybe. Dr. Severin. Okay, we'll try coming back to you here in a minute. In the meantime, let's see, we have Dr. Nancy Jordan. Dr. Nancy Jordan, are you there? Please click the unmute.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, thank you.
I was wondering, I hear talk about how the nurses and the doctors do not have the proper protective gear, such as masks and gowns and so forth. Now, I did see President Trump said he had a huge shipment this past week. Is it just that they haven't distributed it yet, or are we having a problem with there's still a shortage?
I think it's a little of both. I think the distribution's been poor, and I think there is a shortage overall. The FDA has to approve all this stuff. So as a result, there were not enough masks being made, not enough ventilators being made because the FDA had to approve it. And that's it's just not quick enough when we have a rapidly spreading virus like this. And we've got to react more quickly. We can't sit around and wait for the FDA to approve something, or we can't have products that are not produced in sufficient supply because it's not profitable, because you need the FDA to approve or disapprove it. Here I see another question here. I won't mention your name, Diana, but it's good to hear from you. And she's asking, why isn't the AMA and other medical societies speaking up more about this? And they should be. I would say the reason is they've been very politicized, and we're in a presidential election year, and they're afraid to take a stance that might be perceived to be on one side or the other side politically. And I think they're just afraid to say anything. And so they won't stand up and criticize the agencies that are getting in the way of care to the patients. And the AMA does not stand up for independent physicians the way they used to. So there's that problem too. They've got so much institutional influence there that they don't stand up for the private practitioner the way that AAPS does and the way that should be done. Jeremy?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, Dr. Severin says she put her question in the Q&A block. I'm not immediately seeing that. I'll look through there in a second here, but in the meantime, I'll let Dr. Kurt Barrett ask a question here. Dr. Barrett. All right, are you there, Dr. Barrett? I can see you're unmuted on my end. Maybe, let me try again there. Try one more time.
It keeps going on and off.
Yep, okay. Okay, well, let's see. I think he also may have a question in the Q&A block, so.
Yeah, I'll see some here.
So we'll come back to him. Let's see, we'll just browse.
And Jeremy, will we save these Q&A so we can respond to people by email? I mean, here's a good question about posting a reference to how the flu vaccine increases one's vulnerability to COVID-19. So we should be able to get that on an email.
Yeah, so what I would say to that is, if we did not get your question tonight and you'd like us to answer it, please reply to the follow-up email you'll be getting tonight. Just reply to that with your question, and we'll work on getting you an answer. Like I saw one in here about, wondering about what the various rules in states regarding telemedicine are. Well, I'm sure we can find a resource for you on that, but please just email us. That was asked by an anonymous person. So, but if you would email us, we'll get you an answer on that.
Here's a good question from Jeffrey. I remember you. Good that you're still active. He says, when are we going to get back to normal, clinical normalcy? June of this year, August, or not till 2021? Tough to say. I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that the predictions of all these deaths will not be realized, that the warmer weather, the expanded use of the medications and stuff will bring this crisis to a close. But I just hope there aren't some long-lasting harms that result from this.
Okay. I did find Dr. Severin's question. She was kind enough to point me to the timestamp. She asks, doctors are being told to assume COVID-19 on death certificates with or without a test. This artificially inflates the death rates. And she provides a link to that. And I can probably post, well, I may be able to post that and put it in the chat for others to see. But I guess, thank you for letting us know about that. Yeah, I was not aware of that.
So that's a little double standard, isn't it, Jeremy? You have to have a test to get the medication to save your life, but if you die, you're supposed to put COVID-19 on it regardless.
Right. Yeah. So let's see, just looking through here, some of these other questions. Can a group of families of patients who died of COVID bring a suit together? I guess presumably against a state medical board or governors or someone else who's blocking the availability of medicine.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should see that. Absolutely.
Okay.
And as I say, there's a racial bias we're starting to see, and we're going to start to see some complaints about that. African Americans are dying at a much higher rate than whites. So we're going to see a class action about that, I think, and hope we'll get some answers.
Okay, and thank you. Then there's another, this is an interesting comment. All doctors who are reducing their practice hours at the moment can receive a reduction in premium on their, that's a reduction in their professional liability insurance premium. And in some cases, the reduction is significant. So be sure to talk to your professional liability carrier about that. Thank you for that tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah, okay, and then there's several people asking if the webinar will be available afterwards. Yep, my plan is to send a link to watch it in the email with the survey link. And if I'm not able to do that, we'll get it to you, by tomorrow morning. But my goal is to get it to you tonight.
All right, now here's someone who says that Chris Cuomo is saying now what medications he's taking as he sits at home comfortably and recovers from coronavirus. He's complaining about how painful it is, but he's there in the comfort of his basement, while his brother's plan is to get everybody in a hospital. But supposedly on Twitter, Chris Cuomo is saying what he's taking. Well, I bet he doesn't say he's taking hydroxychloroquine. But I will look. Let's all look at his Twitter feed and see what he's taking.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So also, I'm getting a note here that we're having a doctor call in from Texas who may have some very interesting information about what the Texas Medical Board is doing to doctors who are trying to operate on their patients. So I'm looking for that call to come in here. I'm keeping my eye open for that. And we'll wait maybe just a minute for that because I think that would be important to hear about. So let's just see, let's look at through these other questions here quickly. Yeah, there's a number of questions about Dr. Cole's testing and what he has available. The doctor who spoke earlier about the testing he has available. If you're interested in more information about that, please just reply to the follow-up email you'll be getting. He can answer those questions. And let's see. Yeah, we really appreciate you all. It looks like, perhaps we have Dr. Thomas here who wanted to make one more comment. While we're waiting for the Texas physician to call, we'll give him a shot here. Dr. Thomas, did you have something else to weigh in with? Okay, let's see. So yeah, other interesting information we're seeing here in the Q&A just about the California Medical Board. They are now sending threatening information to doctors who are prescribing hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. And I think our past president, Dr. Singleton, sent us a note about that earlier, that now the California is piling on. Yeah, thank you for that information. All right, let me see. Going to try Dr. Thomas one more time here. Dr. Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. The Black Americans, African Americans dying at a higher rate, more prevalence of high blood pressure, so they're on more ACEs and ARBs. This affects people with who are diabetic at a higher rate. Can we hold Mr. Fauci responsible? And can we hold some people like Gilead responsible? There's no real way to research this coronavirus or COVID-19 and not figure out that hydroxychloroquine is the, for lack of a better word, long-term antidote.
I think the stronger case would be against the governors. I don't know that Fauci has really done anything specific, but these governors have. I mean, these governors have forbidden the early prescription of hydroxychloroquine. And in terms of African Americans having higher blood pressure and diabetes, the early data just came out of Michigan today is that there are more blacks dying of COVID-19 in Michigan than whites. Not in proportional numbers, not in per capita numbers, but they're more in total numbers. There are more blacks dying of it than whites when they're probably, I don't know, 3.5 times as many whites as blacks in Michigan. So I don't know unless you can explain that just based on blood pressure and diabetes. The lack of early treatment seems to be the real problem here.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Thomas. We do have the doctor from Texas. I'm going to go ahead and bring him on. Are you there, Dr. Berry?
Yes, I am here.
Thank you for joining us. Please go
Thanks
ahead.
for having me.
Oh, you
Thanks
bet.
for having me. No, I appreciate it. Well, I don't know what, again, was communicated before I just jumped on here. So maybe to tee it up as far as what to discuss, what's happening here in Texas with the Texas Medical Board. I'm not sure exactly maybe what had been discussed prior to my jumping on the call here.
Yeah. So please just go ahead and tell us. I think we may have talked about that a while back, so we need a little refresher, if you would. Just please explain to us what's going on.
Yeah, well, in Texas where I practice, I'm an orthopedic surgeon, and I've been in practice 16 years, and we have a order from our governor, and the Texas Medical Board has essentially been weaponized by our governor in order to actually investigate physicians and surgeons who are operating and are not necessarily following the declaration. But the language is very ambiguous. It's ultimately left to the discretion of the surgeon. And when you look in the recommendations, it actually says that as long as you are not depleting the hospital or the facility that you're operating at's PPE, that it should be a non-issue. So I've continued to operate and to take care of patients that I felt was appropriate. And I received a letter from the Texas Medical Board this week saying that I was under investigation. I've never been sued. I've never been under anything like this in my professional career. Been head of board, orthopedic board for the largest healthcare system in Texas, and now another one here. And so this is new to me, but it does appear that the medical board is coming after our colleagues in the state after this declaration went out. And there's been a few clarifications from the Texas Medical Association. There's been FAQs that have been put out by the Texas Medical Board because it really is not clear. And I have great concern because, patients continue to present to my office as a surgeon that are in need of care. I continue to do what I've always done, which is provide the community standard and take great care of patients. But now what's happening is all my colleagues have stopped taking care of patients and operating. I've seen now in my practice patients that have come to me from other orthopedic surgeons because they're scared to operate and do what we would consider is the community standard. And I mean acute fractures, acute tears, ruptured tendons that would need to be fixed and addressed. I fixed an open fracture of a thumb that was bit off by a dog today, and that was sent from somewhere else. And doctors and surgeons are scared to now even operate. In Texas, 2.4% of the hospital beds are occupied as of yesterday. There's only, in my large hospital, only 8 patients in the entire hospital. I was, one of a handful of surgeons that were operating. And unfortunately, we're really scared and everybody's afraid of losing their license. And I was threatened with being thrown in jail, charged a fine, and possibly losing my ability to practice medicine in the state of Texas. And it's just very disconcerting. And you wake up and you think that you're in a communist country and that you are not in the United States. And so I've certainly talked with many of our colleagues here about this, and it's just really disconcerting. And so really wondering, you know, what's the next step? I'm going to have to go through a process. I'm going to have to submit information, justify why I did what I did. And I'm very confident that I had clear justification, as I always did, for performing surgery. And I think one of the misconceptions is to think that orthopedic surgery is elective. No disrespect to my plastic surgery colleagues. We're not cosmetic surgeons. We're doing things that restore function, that allow people to regain mobility, to actually return to work. And here's a time where people are out of work because of everything that's going on. And so it's a perfect time for people to actually have some of their things addressed so that they can get back to meaningful work when this is all over and taking care of their families. And people are scared because they are losing their jobs, and they're going to need to be able to use their bodies and able to actually provide for their families. Many of the people that I'm taking care of are single moms. They're taking care of a family, and they need to be able to work. And so now you have doctors and surgeons like myself that are being threatened by the medical board that if you do that, and we, not you, determine that it wasn't in line of our interpretation of this declaration order, then you could lose the ability to care for your patients and lose your license.
Right.
It's very concerning.
Right. Well, that's very well put. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Berry.
Yeah.
And I spoke earlier how the Texas Medical Board is one of the worst medical boards in the country. And they're just anti-physician. There's a rivalry in Texas where the board dislikes people outside of Austin and so on. And they do this all the time. And this is just a new way that they're going to harass physicians. So what you need to do, what any physician in Texas needs to do in dealing with the medical board, is to get state legislators involved. And so you should get state legislators involved. Bill Zedler is a very good one from the Dallas area who goes up against the medical board all the time. I'm not sure what region you're in Texas, but a local legislator who's your legislator, you get them engaged in this and tell them exactly what you told us. And that's the way you have to fight the Texas Medical Board. And if you do that, you get the right politicians involved, then you'll prevail. So don't get too stressed out about it.
Yeah, I did do that. Thanks for that. I did reach out to our senator here, and whose husband also happens to be the attorney general. And so we're working through those channels as well in order to try to address this for all of our colleagues in this state.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Berry, for your advocacy for patients and your courage out there in Texas. Really appreciate you coming on to talk to us here about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, the Q&A hopper is still full there. I just don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them right now, but please, yeah, do email us your questions when you get our follow-up email tonight, and we will get back to you with some answers as best.
And maybe we'll hold another webinar on this topic, Jeremy. Wouldn't it be interesting in a week or two to hold another one with the new information we have coming in and just update everybody? Could be a little bit, maybe a shorter webinar, not carry on so long afterwards, but just as kind of an update on some of these issues. It's changing so rapidly, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important that we keep discussing this, and a great idea. Yeah, we'll plan to do this again before long here. So, all right, with that, I think we're going to have to wrap up here. And thank you again for taking the time to be with us tonight. I'm bringing up a couple ending slides here. Yeah, thank you again for taking the time to be with us tonight. We're grateful for all of you are doing on the front lines of patient care during these challenging times. Like I said, if we didn't get to your question, please simply reply to the post-webinar email you'll be receiving here in the next 15 minutes or so. Let's see, let me advance my slide. There we go. In that email, you'll see a link, which you see here, to the survey. And once you fill out the evaluation, you'll be receiving a link to download a CME certificate. And in addition, in that email, there'll be an opportunity to support the American Health Legal Foundation, the 501c3 arm of AAPS. That funds many of our legal efforts to defend the rights of patients and physicians. And here's just a final slide here. This is what you'll see when you get to the CME certificate. Note the red arrow, what that's pointing to. That's the button you'll need to click to download the certificate to your computer. Yeah, it's a little tricky to find that button the first time, but once you click it, the certificate will shoot right down to you. And again, if you have any problems with that, just let me know and we'll get you a certificate. And so with that, for all of us here at AAPS, I wish you all a good night. Thank you very much again for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.